you get done with your Supreme Court response.
Okay.
Just to go response.
We're going to go ahead and close this.
It was a response to the motion.
Gentlemen, it looks like we have started streaming live, so this is currently live on YouTube. I would like to mention, if you are going to be testifying, if in between, if you may mute your microphone. Sometimes that we have issues where if you have your microphone next to your speaker, it's going to create a lot of reverb and a lot of feedback, so it gets really loud and echoey here in the room. So if that's the case, just try to be mindful of it. And if it gets to a certain point where it's too much, we may have to mute you or have to kind of work with that mute function. So just try to be conscious of that as we go through this hearing. So outside of that, I think that's all I've got to say from an IT standpoint. So I think that covers it.
Okay. We'll reconvene the court in the matter of the case CI 2020-60. Mr. Bowen, thanks for your help and cooperation the last couple of days of working ourselves through and around. The only matter of business I think that we've got to take care of first is let's go ahead and swear anyone who's going to give testimony today. Mr. Clerk, you want to do that for us?
Please raise your right hand.
Okay, so we have from the assessor's office. Mr. Clay, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Bob Clay with the assessor's office.
Great, thanks, Bob. And then we have Mr. Porter as an appraiser, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then Mr. Lusk is a petitioner, or he's giving testimony today?
He is the sole member of the Taxpayer LLC, Judge.
Okay, will he be testifying today?
Potentially so. He needs to be sworn.
Okay. So all three of you ready and follow the instructions of the clerk, please.
Please raise your right hand. I. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
So for the record, let's stand that all three replies, I do.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Bowen, you're welcome to begin your presentation of your case.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I'll call to the stand, so to speak, Mr. J. Porter.
It is, so to speak. Everything is, so to speak, these days.
That's right. I'm ready to proceed when you are, Your Honor.
All right, we're ready.
Mr. Porter, will you state your name for the record, please?
J. Rogers Porter.
Where do you work, Mr. Porter?
Porter Valuation Group.
And what's your title there?
I'm the principal.
How long have you been with Porter Valuation Group?
It was established in the year 2000.
And can you tell us what some of your duties are at Porter Valuation Group?
Yes, we are commercial real estate appraisers. We provide consulting services, market analysis, and feasibility studies.
Can you tell the court where you attended school?
University of Arkansas and Arkansas Tech University.
What degrees do you possess from those two institutions?
Bachelor of Public Relations.
And as the principal at Porter Valuation Group, do you hold any professional designations that allow you to engage in the type of work you engage in?
I am a certified general real estate appraiser recognized by the state of Arkansas.
Did you have to pass an exam to get that designation?
I did indeed.
And how long have you held that designation?
2005.
Have you had any previous places of employment, Mr. Porter?
Only subcontractor wise.
Okay. And with respect to this particular case, you're familiar with why we're at this hearing today.
I am indeed.
And what role have you played in the participation of this case, or what has your participation in this case been up to this point?
My role was to provide a independent appraisal for the property owner on the property in question.
And did you prepare a report as a result of that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Can you explain to the court what you reviewed in preparing your report?
Well, yeah, sure. But it's multi-stage, subject property data, regional data, neighborhood data, specific property, market analysis data. I've reviewed sales and rents and market trends and investment avenues, just about everything you need to provide a credible valuation.
And as a result of that review and the preparation of your report, did you arrive at an opinion as to the value of the property that's the subject of this case?
I did.
And do you believe your testimony will be helpful to the judge in understanding your position as to the value of the property in this case?
Repeat that one more time, I'm sorry.
Do you believe your testimony as to the value of the property will be helpful to the judge in understanding what the proper resolution of this case should be?
I'm hopeful, yes.
All right. Your Honor, I'm looking at a report that I've provided to Mr. Jenner and the other county representatives. The cover page is, or says rather, Porter Valuation Group. It is the appraisal report on the property at issue, which is 1700 Brookwood Drive. And I say that for purposes of identification for everyone. Mr. Porter, do you have a copy of this report that I'm referencing in front of you?
Yes, sir, I do.
And are you familiar with this report? Can you tell the court what it is?
I'm very familiar with it. It is a commercial appraisal report on self-storage.
Your Honor, at this time, we would introduce the report as Petitioner's Exhibit 1, and I'll ask Mr. Porter to walk us through the report. Mr. Porter, I know that I asked you what you reviewed in preparing this report. Can you please outline your general methodology employed in this report to arrive at a value on the property, or your opinion as to the value of the property?
Well, the methodology is stated in my scope of work, but it includes, again, research of pertinent characteristics of the market, such as employment, income, population growth. It describes the market analysis with regarding specifically to self-storage facilities in the subject's immediate neighborhood and in the expanded market. I consider I employed 3 different approaches: the cost, the sales, and the income approach, and I reconciled my values from there.
Can you please describe for us each of the valuation approaches that you used and the differences between those and what you believe to be the most appropriate approach in arriving at the proper valuation of the property at issue?
So the cost approach is used. The cost approach is helps us establish whether or not it's a project's feasible, or in this case, whether or not We have maybe some super adequacy in the market concerning based on the difference between the price to build it, the cost to build it, and the market value willing to be paid by somebody else, by a third-party buyer. Sales comparison approach now analyzes recent sales based on a per square foot basis, which is industry standard. It also you do employ a little bit of the income approach within the cost approach, because these properties sell based on revenue, so some of your adjustments may be based on differences of net income per square foot. And then, of course, the income analysis is based on market rents, which are researched and displayed in the report, market expenses, market cap rates, market occupancy levels, and market return on investments rates. And in this case, market was used for everything. The subject's actual expenses were used and reconciled to the market. The rents were used and reconciled to the market. In some cases, subject's rents were above market. In some cases, rents were below market. In any case, market rents were used. From there, we established a value of the income approach based on the income approach, and then all three values are reconciled at the end of the report.
And what was the result of that reconciliation between the values derived from the three methods you used?
Well, primary weight was given to the income approach, of course, because that's the typical tool that buyers of this asset type are concerned with. Secondary weight was given to the sales comparison approach, and the cost approach was not given any consideration in the final value.
Why is that?
The cost approach in this case is not typically used by buyers and sellers of this asset, and the super adequacy of the improvements aren't displayed in the income or even in the sales from the market.
And as a result of that reconciliation, what is your opinion as to the value of the property at issue?
My reconciled value was $5,050,000.
And
Let me ask a question there, Mr. Bowen.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to ask a question there. I'm just trying to stick it in where I think it belongs.
Absolutely, Your Honor.
Just in question on the value conclusion, you list out separately the site value at 635,000, then the cost approach 6.2, and site sales comparison 565, and then 5,050 on income. So is the site value in addition to each one of these, or is it included in the
No, sir. No, sir. Site value is valued separately, and it is included in each of the other values. So the 6.2, the 5 million, and the 5 million. Hang on just a second. I'm gonna get to that page. The value conclusion, the site value is just listed separately. It's not in addition to
And so the 6.2 million, the 6.2 million includes the 635,000, and the 5,050,000 includes the 635,000 site value.
That's correct. That is
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. I note that the date on your report is October 27. Does that mean that the values set forth under those three different approaches and your ultimate conclusion of a value of $5.05 million is accurate as of October 27th, 2020?
That's correct.
And in looking at the income approach, I know that you've testified that that depends upon not only the revenues that are being generated by the property, but also the property expenses. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so if we're looking at the value of the property from an ad valorem tax perspective, are you aware that the value for tax assessment purposes is as of January 1 of each calendar year?
I am.
And would it be correct to say then that if either revenues or expenses were different on January 1 than they were on October 27th, which is the date of your report, that your opinion as to the value of the property could change?
That is correct.
Have you reviewed financial information for the taxpayer and the taxpayer's property for the end of 2019 or early in 2020?
I reviewed 2019 revenue and expenses and year-to-date revenue expenses for 2020, which were, I believe, through October.
And with respect to your review of the finances for 2019, did you notice any differences in the operation of the property at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020 and throughout 2020 up until your report date of October 27?
Yes, the revenue for the gross revenue for, or excuse me, the effective gross revenue for 2019 was $462,000. The year-to-date revenue was $608,000. So there was quite a bit of increase in revenue, about a 30% increase in revenue from year to year, which would result in, which is reflective of his lease up of the property from being new to getting to established stabilized occupancy.
And when you say lease up and stabilized occupancy, can you explain to the court what those two terms mean and what those are?
Absolutely. So when you have a new property, especially a multifamily or a self-storage that is constructed, not all the units are going to lease up within the first day of the property being built. So we actually provide three values when we value these properties. We provide an as-is value, an as complete once the construction is complete, and then an as stabilized. And the difference in these values is the timing. And a property like a multifamily or a self-storage where you've got to achieve a market occupancy level, it takes time to lease those units up. So therefore, over the course of that timeline, you're going to have different values that will ultimately lead to the final value as stabilized, which is sometime in the future. So if we built a building today and it was completed this time next year, it might take 3 years for it to reach stabilized occupancy. So the value of that property as fully stabilized is not recognized until that third year after completion. So, and that's what we're seeing here. We've got revenues of 2019 are, roughly 30% less than what they are in 2020. We're getting to that stabilized occupancy, but we're not there yet.
And with respect to the lesser revenues that were, well, let me rephrase. You recognize in reviewing the financial information that the revenues were less at the end of 2019. Is that because the storage facility was less occupied at that time?
That's correct, yes.
And if the storage facility was less occupied and there was less revenue, what effect on the valuation of the property would that have?
Well, it has a major effect. These properties are sold based on how much revenue they generate. So with that being said, you know, this time last year, if Mr. Lusk had decided he wanted to sell this property, the buyer would have paid him on his net operating income from 2019 and probably forecasted for 2020, but only having 1 year, it's difficult to determine that. So, you know, here we're seeing a 30% increase in revenue from year to year, which indicates that we're leasing up. Now he's getting closer to market stabilized occupancy. He's got a more marketable property, which is going to be reflected in the potential sales price.
Okay, and so is it correct to say then that your opinion on value as of October 27, 2020, which is the date of your report, is a higher value than your opinion of value on January 1, 2020?
Yes, I would have to obviously look at revenues from that period of time and then forecast based on that. But yes, indeed. Again, we're on that timeline from when the property was complete until we get stabilized, which is sometime in the future. And for self-storages, your stabilization period is between 3 to 5 years. In our market, it's probably closer to 5 years because we're far oversupplied. So lease up is not as quick as in some other markets.
Thank you. I want to turn to page 15 of your appraisal report. Let me know when you're there. It'll take me a second to get there as well.
All right.
Can you read the heading on that page for me, please, Mr. Porter?
Current taxation and assessment description.
And can you describe in general that page and analysis to us and what conclusion you drew?
Sure. So I have included 5 comparable or 5 self-storage properties from Pulaski County, 2 of which are in the subject's immediate neighborhood. The other 3 are similar in use and size as the subject. The difference is that I noticed early on is the subject is being taxed based on a gross building area and not a net rentable area. So when you isolate that against all these comparables, he's about 30% higher than or 40% higher than what he is. If he's 40% higher than what the comparables show as far as tax rates. His tax rate is based on the total building area of 97,000 square feet, which, if you computed that out, it would be in line with these numbers here. It's roughly 77 cents a square foot. The problem is that when I break it out as far as net rentable area, and these comparables are based on the net rentable area, he is $1.11 a foot, and the comparables range from 60 cents a foot to 79 cents a foot. So it looks like there might be a little discrepancy there.
In looking at that and making the distinction between the gross square footage of the facility and what's actually rentable, what would the taxes have to be decreased to bring him in line with those comparable properties?
Well, I mean, if he was taxed, if his taxes fell in line with the ones displayed on this chart relative to his gross rentable area, then it would be within the market.
But if we are looking at, or let me ask, am I correct to say if we're comparing net rentable space to net rentable space, his taxes would have to be decreased in order to bring them in line with the comparable properties.
That would be correct, yes.
Can you provide a range as to what those taxes would be to bring him in line
Well,
if we're comparing net to net?
Total taxes, I don't have computed, but here we have the snap box on West 10th Street that is 60 cents a foot, and our high is the used storage on the freeway there at 79 cents a foot. So there's a range right there of net rentable of taxes versus the net rentable square footage.
Thank you. I'm going to turn now, Mr. Porter, to a document that was provided to me and has been provided to you by Mr. Jenner. It has a cover page that says Spaces Riverdale and a parcel number. Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Have you reviewed its contents, and are you familiar with what it is?
I am indeed.
Can
I
you
am indeed, yes.
can you describe to the court what you believe this document to be?
Well, I'm under the assumption that it is the valuation from the county for the subject property.
Do you agree with the methodologies employed in this report?
Theoretically, yes, but technically, no. The methodology is there's a couple of glaring things that kind of stick out to me. One is industry standard is that you value self-storage based on per square foot, not a per unit. That can be skewed because of unrentable units or units that don't generate as much revenue compared to those who have a better mix of units. But you know, as far as looking at the methodology is fine. It's the market data in it may not be as accurate though.
Thank you. I want to turn, and these pages aren't numbered, but I'm looking at it's the fourth from the last page. It's got a table on it that says potential gross income. If you can turn there for me.
Okay.
Hang on, I'm keeping it up here. Potential gross income is the top of the page.
That's right. It's the first table. There are actually two of them in the packet.
Go back one page.
Okay, so it's the previous page that also says potential gross income.
Yes, sir. That's the one I'm looking at.
I'm there.
Mr. Porter, can you describe to the court what you understand this to be?
Well, this to me is it's basically the same thing as my direct capitalization approach in a little bit less detail. The one thing that I was concerned about that I brought up was that the rate is established at $2,800, which would mean that the average monthly rental rate for the subject would be $233 per unit, when in actuality, the average contract rent is $149 per unit. Also, I noticed that it had 584 units, and my calculation, there's 573. That's not a big difference, but a little bit of a difference. With regards to the, vacancy and operating expenses ratios, those are pretty much in line with the market.
And on the right-hand side of the table, you have valuation calculations, final value, $9.811 million and change, $200. Is it your understanding that that's the appraiser's or assessor's opinion with respect to the capitalization value?
I'm assuming so. There's not enough detail here to really determine that, but that's what I would assume. Yes.
And then if we turn pages, just one page to the next table that says potential gross income, if you could describe your understanding of this table to the court, please.
Sure. Well, so this is the same method as before. The same looks like the same market or the same rental rate as established. In this case, the operating expenses have been increased a little bit, which they're still within the market. And vacancy and credit loss has been increased by 20%. So it looks like the value, looks like the high-end value was established in the first slide or first page, and the low-end value was established in the second on the second page.
But as you mentioned, there's not enough detail here to fully understand either of those calculations.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's all I have for the witness at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, I've just got a few quick questions. Mr. Porter, can you hear me all right?
I certainly can.
Okay, so earlier on, you said in your evaluation process, the primary weight is given to the income valuation method, correct?
That's correct. And
when you're looking at that, did you say that you're specifically looking at what a buyer of that asset type would look at?
Well, that's what establishes market value, is actions between buyers and sellers.
And so
yes.
Okay, so that market value between buyers and sellers, that is what is going to come or is going to lead you to your income approach valuation, correct?
Well, when a sale is closed, we see that as a sales comparison approach. We're going to match, properties up one to one. We're going to analyze this sale here. We're going to analyze this sale here. But what it boils down to is it's still the actions of buyers are purchasing these properties based on income potential. So
I got you.
Does that help explain it a little bit more?
Yeah. And so
good.
Oh, yeah.
So, Mr. Porter, I have a question. So your sales comparisons is what allows you to do a little math and calculate what the incomes were for those sale comparison properties based on dividing that sales amount by the rentable square footage. Is that close to being correct?
So what I look at is, I look at the physical characteristics, the condition, the quality, because you have Class A space, you have Class B space, and Class C space. But yes, sir, to answer your question, that's correct. What I've done here is it's broken down to net operating income per square foot. So when you analyze these sales, if you've got a property that has a higher net income operating per square foot, it's going to sell higher than one that doesn't. It's just, common sense. So I use that as a method to analyze these sales.
And I think I understand. Thank you for answering my question.
You bet.
My only other question was, so you had also stated that buyers, when looking at the value of the property, they're going to forecast the income of this property going forward, correct?
That is correct. Real estate's purchased on the principle of anticipation.
Okay, so the future incomes or the future income is going to impact the current value of the property, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Bowen?
Only
Anything else?
one redirect question, Mr. Porter. Acknowledging that the future streams of income are going to impact current value of the property, just to be sure that I understand your testimony correctly, as of October 27, 2020, your opinion is that taking those future streams of income into account, the value of the property would be $5,050,000, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And it's your opinion that on January 1st, due to the higher vacancy rate, taking those future streams of income into account, the value of the property would have been less than $5.05 million.
As of the date of that analysis. So if I were engaged to appraise this property January 7th of 2020, it would be an indication of value on that date.
And because of your review of the financial information, I believe you've testified that that value would be less than the $5.05 million on October 27.
It would, yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to call Mr. Lusk for just one or two quick questions.
All right, Mr. Lusk, are you there?
Yes, sir, Your Honor, I am.
Okay, I'll just remind you that you've already been sworn.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Lusk, how many total units are at this property?
Well, it would be the rentable would be what Jay Porter said. There are units, I can't remember, we have a number of units that are not rentable because they have mechanical units in them or they have company items that we have inventory to store. So the 573 would be the number.
Okay. Do you know how many unrentable units there are currently?
Let me pull, Martha, will you pull a report up on that? If you can hang on just a second, I'll have Martha pull up a report for me.
Okay. And while we're waiting on that, does that number fluctuate much throughout the year of rentable versus unrentable units?
Not really.
Okay. I'll ask a few more questions while we're waiting on that. Mr. Lusk, do you keep records of your rent rolls for every month?
Well, it's in our software.
Okay. Does your software keep records of your rent income, rent rolls for every month?
Yes,
And do you still have the rent roll records for every month of 2020?
we do.
And those are still in your possession as of today?
Well, our software is cloud-based, so it's within the software in the cloud.
I got you, but you could gather that information if you needed to, correct?
We could.
Okay, and do you also maintain records for your income for the entire year?
We do. And
Okay.
all of this I provided to Mr. Porter. Now, let me say this. You asked for a rent roll. The problem we have with rent rolls is that it has customers' names on it and their addresses and their personal information. And we're hesitant to just give that to anybody because we feel like that we're that we don't have their permission to divulge who our customers are. But we can certainly show income, occupancy levels, rental activity. You know, when I say rental activity, how many units did we rent? How many move outs? How many net rentables did we have? We have all of that information.
Okay.
I did provide this to Mr. Porter for him to do his analysis.
I understand. I was just asking about the existence of these records. And so you also maintain records of your annual income, and this is the record that you provide to the IRS for your annual income, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you have a copy of that as well?
Yes, I do. Sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're asking me, can we prove our income? Is that what, I mean, we certainly show.
I was just asking about the existence of the record.
Sure.
Okay. And I guess we still don't know the total number of units.
How many did you say?
Oh, I'm sorry, 8.
8. I'm sorry, we have 8 unrentable units.
Okay, so 573 rentable, 8 unrentable, so 881 or 581 total.
Right.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have for this witness, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Bowen, you have anything for Mr. Lusk?
I do. Mr. Lusk, I want to turn again to the Spaces Riverdale report provided by the assessor's office. Mr. Porter testified as to those potential gross income tables that there was a rate per unit of $2,800. Is that $2,800 a fair representation of the rate you receive on your units that you rent?
Well, no. After we had a discussion about that, and that breaks down to $233 per unit, that's $84 higher than our actual rent. So we're actually at $149 per rent per unit per month.
And so, in other words, this rate of $2,800 is inaccurate as to your actual business operations.
Yes, sir.
And turning back to the appraisal report, I believe Mr. Porter said that your current tax rate on your property as assessed, bear with me one moment while I get back to that page, is $1.11 per square foot.
Yes, sir.
How long have you been in the business of operating self-storage buildings, Mr. Lusk?
26 years.
Do you own or have you owned buildings other than the property at issue today?
Yes, sir. I have. This is the third store that I have. I sold my original store, but I do have a store in West Little Rock as well as the store in question.
And in your experience from operations, what is a typical tax range for a property like yours?
Well, in preparing for all this, I did the same thing that Mr. Porter went through. I went through all of the comparable storage properties here in Little Rock that to mine, and I was seeing tax rates as low as 56 cents a foot. They just run the gamut from 64, 67, 74 cents, 56 cents, 60. So the thing is in this business, we're in the business of renting space, and it's competitive because people price shop, even more so now because we're oversupplied in Little Rock. So you're seeing a lot more discounting. And so I can't sell my store any higher as far as square footage, leasable square footage. I can't sell my product higher than my competitors. We're all right there together. So if you've got me at $1.11 a foot and everybody else is in the neighborhood of 56 to 74 or 79 cents a foot, it makes a huge impact on my bottom line. When I look at right now where my percentage of my property taxes are as opposed to my gross income, I'm over 12%, where most people are going to be in the neighborhood of 5 to 7% of their gross. So it's impacting my bottom line greatly.
And that 5 to 7% gross that you indicate your competitors would see when you compare property tax rates with income, how do you know that competitors are seeing a 5 to 7% rate of tax to income?
Well, you can go, I mean, I know pretty much what my West Little Rock store produces. And based on the income of that store, we're just right at 5% of our gross income for our property taxes. Now, you guys mentioned Snapbox Storage because they're a REIT out of Philadelphia, and they purchased two facilities here in Little Rock within the last couple of years. And I visited with the CFO of Snapbox, and I was telling him about my tax situation. And he said, well, it's a growing problem. There's no question about it. But I said, where do you like to be on your property taxes as a percentage of your gross? And he said between 5 and 7%.
Okay, thank you.
But Mr. Bowen, we do rent analysis comparisons with our competitors. We have to, because we have to know where to be in the market. We don't want to be too high because we don't want to lose that sale. And we're all basically charging the same thing. So I go back to the $1.11 a foot. To me, it's just way too high for what comparable properties are paying in Little Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Lusk. That's all I have for the witness, Your Honor.
I have nothing more for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, well, I think that apparently concludes things for the petitioner, and Frank, for the assessor, I guess you have Mr. Clay.
I do, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Clay, remember you're already sworn in, and if you will, proceed.
Mr. Clay, can you hear us okay?
I can.
Okay. Mr. Clay, can you briefly just tell us a little bit about your position?
Certainly. I've been with the assessor's office for 20 years. I'm currently the commercial appraisal manager for the assessor's office. I've been in the appraisal industry since 1986. I hold a certified general designation and IFA and ASA designations.
Okay. Do you have a copy of the presentation that you provided regarding your evaluation of the property?
I do. My presentation has been changed up. I sent that to you, I believe, yesterday morning. It sounds like they were still reading from the old presentation. I had to change that up after receiving the appraisal report Friday, and in reviewing the information that was provided to the Board of Equalization in 2009, I realized there was an error.
I
don't mean to interrupt, Mr. Clay. I'm sorry. I don't have a copy of the updated report. I haven't seen that.
Mr. Clay, if I'm not mistaken, was the last presentation you had sent to us on Friday morning?
I sent you the update yesterday.
Okay.
We haven't been provided a copy of that.
Yeah, I acknowledge that. Mr. Clay, since I haven't prepared that and I have not gotten that to Mr. Bowen or this court, would you be able to at least review the materials from the presentation on Friday? And then if there are any mistakes or corrections that need to be made, just point those out.
Surely everything's the same except for my income approach.
Okay.
And I did add a spreadsheet that explains how I came up with the potential gross income.
Okay.
So would you like for me to start with my report now?
Yeah, if you could,
Still
well,
there?
I'm here. So, you said that you just changed the income approach between Friday's revision and Monday's revision?
I'm sorry, I lost your audio.
So you've changed the values in your income approach during that time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does it follow a similar method that's used in the presentation provided on Friday?
It certainly does.
Okay, so could we look at that in the presentation on Friday and then just point out where the numbers are different?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's just skip down. I don't believe the subject history has changed much. Let me start with that page.
Okay, let's start with the subject history page in the presentation.
In 2015, the land was purchased for $637,075. There's a 20 building permit taken in 2016 for about 6.2 million. The subject was built between 17 and 18. It opened up in March of 2018 per the on-site manager. We have a total of 97,373 square feet of gross area associated with the units, and that will include common area, if you will, the hallways and elevators. It's going to include everything. There were 584 units associated with the property, and that was given to the Board of Equalization during the hearing. In 2019, when we added the value to the books for the first time, we employed a cost approach, and that value was $7,535,600, 12,903 a unit. And that cost approach was employed because we were not provided any rent information nor a unit count. 2019, the BOE lowered the value to $5,250,000, and that was based on, and I'm going from information provided to me by the appraiser that handled that appeal. The BOE was given a unit count of 552 and a vacancy rate of 58%. So the BOE allowed for a lease up, if you will, in 2019 based on that vacancy rate. The 2020 assessor's cost approach, we put the value right back up to where it was. 2020, the BOE lowered the value to $5,350,000. So the income info provided in 2019 was, I believe, 552 units. Then the unit count changed to 509 for 2020, and this was provided by the folks representing the petitioner before the board. That unit count was changed during the hearing to 584. The BOE nor our offices received a rent roll or accurate unit breakdown by unit sizes with rents. So the next page is headed Spaces Riverdale, LLC. It's a spreadsheet showing the unit sizes and the total unit count breakdown. It's my understanding that this was provided to, may have been provided to us before the hearing in 2019. That point I'm a little bit unclear on. But if you'll look at the bottom line where it says 552 units, then you look at the next box, you see 2,800. And then the PGI of 1,545,600. That was what was provided to our office and the board in 2019. So you can see our confusion in where in the world their rents were coming from to show that their average unit is is pulling in $233 a square foot or per unit, I believe is the average unit count calculation from that 2,800. That's an annualized average rent. So that was information provided to the board and to us in 2019. Now in 2020, the next line is handwritten. That's what was provided to us, I believe, prior to the 2020 board hearing, where the unit count had dropped to 509. And now the average rent is 1,800, which calculates to 150 per unit. And a PGI of 916, the vacancy was 40%. The EGI, or effective gross income, 549,720. Total expenses 25%. NOI is 412,290. And an 8 cap was employed for a value of 5,153,625. And that was the value provided by Mike Pierce and Lee Stevens, who are also both certified general appraisers here in the state. Okay, so that's where the 2,800 came from, not from us, but from the owner's representation, apparently. I'm just going by what I was told in this piece of paper, or this sheet that you're looking at that was given to me, that was provided to the BOE. So the next page, and again, this note was given before I knew that now they're at a 20% vacancy rate instead of a 40% vacancy rate. So I was going on the units that were shown to be a higher vacancy were the 10 by 20 to 10 by 35 range, and none of those units are listed on their website at all. So it'd be a thing where suddenly those larger units have come into play, and they're renting really, really well since 2019 and the first of the year, because they're not listed on their webpage. Go to the next sheet. Well, actually, you all don't have this sheet. If you'll go back up to the Spaces of Riverdale LLC sheet that had the erroneous $2,800 figure, the error comes into play on the very last line where it says 10 by 30. Under the 2 by 3 in economy, it's just the last line that says 10 by 30, and then the area square foot's 300. If you'll move over, it shows the total income from those units to be $264,180, and the average rent, or the annual rent per unit, is $1,295. So that's where the mistake came into play. Okay, so in looking at the website, I was trying to figure out how much they might be asking for 10 by 30 spaces, and they weren't showing up. So that was another thing that kind of added to my confusion. Since they were such a high vacancy rate, 19 and early in 20, now there's none listed on their website. So basically what I did I wish you all could see it, but I have a spreadsheet laid out that has all the rents indicated on their 2019 spreadsheet with a correction on the 10 by 30 unit. I took a look at the 10 by 15, 20, 25, and how the economy of scale, as you get larger, the rents, are going down a little bit price per square foot wise. So I used $175 per unit. That amounted to an average annual rent for my PGI at $1,773. Very similar to the $1,800 per unit provided to the board by Mr. Pierce and Mr. Stevens. So the new rate on my income approach, I used 584 units. Again, that was the unit count provided to the BOE. If the owner wants to use 7, 8, 40 units for his own possession, that doesn't matter to us, and it wouldn't matter to any fee appraiser out there appraising the subject property, because that's a business decision. You have to really you have to look at the overall units and the market vacancy rate, and that's it. Just because it would be no different than having a 584 unit apartment complex and saying, well, you know, don't value 7 of the units because I've got my sister living in one and my uncle living in one and my manager living in one. And when you're an appraiser, you ignore those kind of things because that's a business decision that the owner makes. If he's going to store his own stuff in his own storage units, that's why we call it potential gross income, is because there's a potential to make income off of those units. Those can't be ignored. So again, the unit count of 584 was given to the BOE in the hearing. That's what I used. I used the rent rate, average annual rent rate of $1,773. That gets me to a PGI of $1,035,432. Less vacancy collection loss of 20%, and that's the market rate that we used across the board pretty much, and definitely for properties similar, competing properties similar to the subject for 2017 reappraisal. The expenses, the total amount I used was 40%. That calculates to 331,338. Sorry about that.
Say that expense number again.
I'm sorry.
Say that expense number again.
331,338.
And
That
what's
gets
the,
us.
sorry, what's the calculated vacancy loss amount that you're?
Okay, I'll just go through all the numbers. So the PGI is 1,035,432. The vacancy collection loss amount is 207,086. That makes the EGI, or the effective gross income, 828,346. Less a 40% ratio for the OPEX of 331,338. That takes us to a net income, or NOI, of 497,008. I employed an 8 cap, which is cap rate that we were using for the 2017 reappraisal. That gives an indicated value of $6,212,600. Again, 584, the unit count we were given during the BOE hearing. 20% is the market vacancy rate we used in 2017. We used a 35 to 45 or 35 to 40% expense ratio. That in this particular property, that calculates $3.40 a square foot, and that is for the 97,000 square feet. I'm not real sure where we're coming down to using a 30% a 30% area that is common area, but that I understand it's 3 levels and maybe there's lots of hallways, but that seems like a pretty big difference between the net leasable area and the gross area. But at any rate, the indicated value of 6.212 million, that calculates to $10,638 a unit. And that price per unit is within the range of the equity comparables.
Now, when it comes to the vacancy rate, there's been a lot of talk about the vacancy rate and valuation. Does the vacancy rate, do you look at the current vacancy rate or the market vacancy rate when coming to an income valuation?
The market vacancy rate.
And can you just give some explanation as to why?
We're charged with valuing a property at its fee simple market value. We don't have the wherewithal to reappraise every property in the county every year using their actual income numbers. We revalue either on a 3-year or 5-year reappraisal cycle. we determine, overall market vacancy rates, and those are the vacancy rates that are applied to each property in a group of like similar competing properties.
Now, would a buyer of that asset type look at the current or the market vacancy rate in establishing value?
They would look at both, but they would look at the market vacancy rate, and there's a lot of things that go into that, but they've got to decide whether the subject property is located in a great area, like the subject is, with the number of apartment units, almost within a stone's throw of the property, and how much potential value can be added to that property based on where it's currently leased, how long it's been available to the market, and where that occupancy might grow to. And again, if I have a property to buy and the vacancy rate may be 40%, but the market's 20, and the property's only been online for say a year and a half, and it's grown that much, and I know that the potential's there. I know that the owner's not going to be foolish enough to sell me that property for that based on the income stream alone, because you can't completely discount the number of units that actually exist. Okay, so that would be tantamount to saying, well, I understand this property is only 40% or 60% occupied, but that's I'm going to buy your income stream, and how about you just forget about the remainder of the units? That doesn't happen in the real world.
Now, have you had a chance to review the petitioner's assessment?
I have.
And when the assessment the petitioner provided is looking at the income, are they looking at the actual market income, or are they looking at the actual income of the property or the market income?
Well, that's hard to tell. In the direct capitalization approach, they're looking at adjusted rates. I haven't had enough time to review the property, so I haven't made a review appraisal, but I'm looking at page 96. There are contract rents listed, and then there are market rents listed. So it appears to me that—
Mr. Clay, if you could just restate, sorry, Mr. Clay, you cut out there for a minute. If you could just kind of restate what you were reading.
Sure, I'm on page 96 of the income approach, or the appraisal that's headed income approach, direct capitalization conclusion. The appraiser lists contract rents. Just one note that kind of confuses me is when you're looking at a property and we don't know what the units are actually listed or leased for, because we haven't been given a rent roll, but this does list contract rent. So I've got to assume that those are the actual average contract rents for those particular units. So what I'm confused about is why you would adjust those contract rents down to a quote unquote market rent if the subject property is now at a market vacancy rate. And it's only been online since March of 2019.
Now, do you usually see appraisals use or which approach do you normally see appraisals use? I know there's the term of lease fee versus fee simple.
Well, typically, when appraisals come across our desk at the office, if a lending institution wants to know, wants the appraiser to value the income stream, they will ask for a leased fee value. In other words, give us what the property is worth with the contract rents that are in place. If they want the appraiser to, go out into the market and look at rents, use just market data, market operating expenses, and that sort of thing, they'll ask for a fee simple value. There are lots of different kinds of values, but what so typically if a leased fee value comes across our desk, we have to be really careful because let's say you've got a multi-tenant office building, okay, and the bank wants you to value the income stream, so they ask for a leased fee amount. The appraisers typically will give an average market rent rate. So say if they're looking at a multi-tenant office building and they give the lending institution a market rate of $15 a square foot, but the average contract rents, let's say, are $11 to $12 a square foot. Well, what's the market value of that property? The leased fee value is going to be a lot less than the fee simple value. But if you're valuing the actual income stream on that $11 to $12 amount versus what is actually the market's actually getting out there, a $15 a square foot, you're going to have a wide range in value. So I'm not real sure why the appraiser used market rents, quote unquote, that were adjusted from contract, I'm assuming, when the subject property is leased up to a market rate. We're really close to, let's put it that way. If the property's leasing up like the subject is, that's something that probably should be looked at.
Okay. Your Honor, I have nothing further. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you look at the bottom there on that page 96, under contract, where you have all of the contracts rents listed, magically the number is 149, and that's the average rent. That's going to be really, really close to what we're using. The market rents, however, are at 141, and if you use the 149 and the 584, or even the 581, we're only talking about difference of 3 units. That PGI of 971 328 is going to grow to a number really, really close and maybe over the number that I used.
I gotcha. So using the actual rent with the total number of units gets you to a much closer or more accurate valuation, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, Frank. Mr. Bowen?
Yes, Your Honor. I just have a few questions and then a couple of comments. Mr. Clay, going back to this financial information where you've got Spaces Riverdale LLC, and then 2019 and then 2020 handwritten on the bottom, you indicated that someone, and forgive me, I've forgotten their names, told you that this was provided to the Board of Equalization, but that you can't be sure about that. Is that right? Did I understand you correctly?
That sheet was provided to the Board of Equalization by the gentleman representing the owner.
Okay. Then with respect to the next couple of pages over, with respect to potential gross income, you mentioned that you didn't know how you arrived at 30% of the building square footage being common area. I assume that to mean you thought that was high. Is that right?
It seems high.
Have you actually ever been to the property that we're discussing today?
I have not.
And you also mentioned that with respect to vacancy, you guys were using market rates because you didn't have the wherewithal to reappraise property on an annual basis. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so is it fair to say that you're using aggregate figures, market figures, and applying those to this property or other specific properties to arrive at these assessed values without looking at actual data and figures with respect to the operation of the individual properties? In other words, are these mass appraisal approaches that you all are applying to arrive at assessed values?
You would have to define mass appraisal approaches. We don't model. We value each property on an individual basis, but we do gather market data information while we're out in the field. We do market rent surveys. We also ask on-site managers and owners what their current vacancy rates are as we go through data collecting for each reappraisal. So the data that Mr. Porter gathers is no different than what we do. We just do all of our data collection for 4 years. Then we value everything in the 5th year of a 5-year reappraisal cycle.
Thank you. Judge, a couple of comments. That's all the questions that I have. First, I would say we obviously haven't seen this updated report that Mr. Clay is testifying about today, and it's difficult to really cross-examine him when we haven't seen the document that he's being asked about. So I would ask that at a minimum, we get an opportunity to review that and respond more directly to it. I don't know if that needs to take the form of post-hearing briefing or what have you, but that's a request that we would respectfully make. And in addition, I understand that we're about out of time today, and I know that Mr. Clay had some questions about the report that Mr. Porter submitted, and certainly we would like to respond to that. I know that you have things to tend to here in short order, and so I don't know that we'll have the time to do that today, but I would submit to the court that we could also respond to those statements through some sort of post-hearing briefing if the court was open to it, and that could certainly be a substitution for any redirect examination that I would have of Mr. Lusk or Mr. Porter.
And ten days to put together the 1 page. The explanation to maybe get pages. Okay, thank you, Mr. Bowen. Here's what I'd like to do, gentlemen, is I think we're going to conclude the hearing today. Mr. Jenner, I'm going to ask you to take on the responsibility of transmitting the new document that Mr. Clay was giving testimony on, and get it in, especially Mr. Bowen, but also in my hands in the next 24 hours.
Yes, Ron.
And then, gentlemen, I'll make my determination within 10 days after each of you have submitted an executive version, if you will, of your case. I generally limit that, ask you to limit it to 1 page and submit it to me. Yeah, and that has to be submitted through the clerk, I think, doesn't it? So submit it through the clerk, and then they'll get it to me. In light of the fact that we have this document that's going to actually, we've talked about it, but you're actually not going to see it until after the fact, I'm willing to offer you to have as much as 2 additional pages that you submit to me in this 10 days, if you need it, regarding this new document. Does that make sense to everyone? Everyone understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
Just so I'm clear, Your Honor, so 10 days to submit that document to your office within receipt of this new document that we're discussing. So in other words, 11 days.
Right, working days.
I understand.
So you've got a couple of weeks. And then I'll make my ruling within 2 weeks after receiving both of y'all's closing, basically.
I understand, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lusk and Mr. Clay, Mr. Porter, thank you for taking the time to be available today and helping us navigate the obstacles we had to navigate to get together. And certainly wish everyone a safe, please be safe, Thanksgiving and enjoy your holiday. And
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Judge. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, all right. You give me that as well, and
Yeah.
the clerk stuff, and, I didn't get the appraisal stuff, the clerk stuff, I need that for the file, just basically want to view it.
Okay. I can do all that.
I need the appraisal from them and the stuff, the updated one from, should I get both?
In here,
Yeah,
you talking about Mr. Porter's?
yeah, I don't have the clerk's file.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,